episode 6?
It is.
Ready?
Yeah.
All right. Welcome to episode 6 of the Working Behind the Screens podcast. I am Matt Galka, joined, as always, by Nate Harrington. Nate, do you hear the music?
I sure do, buddy. I sure do. And you tricked me. You're like, hey, can I do the intro this time? I didn't know you were going to pop off with that, but well done, sir. Well done.
I thought it was a nice touch because if you haven't heard, we have a new president. And that's sort of the reason why we were delayed this week. So, we waited a couple days because something kind of big was happening today.
Yeah, we wanted to talk about it a little bit more in depth, and we'll have more to talk about in that regard coming up at the end of the show. But we wanted to give it our full attention. We wanted to see what happened today because we knew this was going to be a historic day for many reasons. And we'll get into those as we go through the body of the podcast. But we're just going to talk about what we saw today. There was a lot of coverage from a lot of different angles and a lot of stuff to unpack. So let's get right into it, Matt. Your impressions of Inauguration Day. Anything you want to throw out there right off the bat? We'll just get the ball rolling here.
Well, I think, and you and I were both watching it multiple ways. I mean, it was on my TV. It was dominating my Twitter timeline. It was dominating my Facebook feed. So, I guess you sort of see all angles. And, I guess my first impression was, and this, whether you see it this way or not, this could be a good thing or a bad thing. I thought it was tame. I did think it was tame. I thought it was, Trump himself was tame. And I guess I say that based on the character that I composited in my head after seeing him campaign and, after seeing him in the debates and after seeing him on the trail and after seeing what he tweets. I just thought he came off tame, and which I think was a good thing, I guess, for the people who don't really like him. He backed up what his supporters voted him in to do. At least he made that in his speech. So I thought we saw a pretty subdued guy. And I say that at the same time thinking, well, what was I expecting? Him to go out there and start yelling at people and saying you're fired or saying it's us versus them. And I was having a conversation with somebody who said, well, you can't do that during an inauguration. And I said, it's easy to say that now, but if he had done that, if he had gone out and said, we won, you lost, that whole thing, would you have been surprised at this point? Because I certainly wouldn't have been. So I just thought I saw a different guy than I guess what I was expecting.
Well, I do agree that, he was a lot more measured in his speaking, but I do think the tone of his inaugural address was a lot of us versus them. His whole rhetoric during this whole campaign was draining the swamp. They were going to change. He was going to change the way Washington operates. A lot of not even undertones. A lot of rhetoric in the address today that spoke to that. We're going to give the government back to you. You, the people. We care about you. There's been a lot of people in Washington that have profited and have been fortunate on the backs of hardworking Americans, and that didn't point out any party. That was across party lines. He said people in Washington, and he's basically talking about the very people that are sitting up on the stage, a couple of feet away from him while he's giving his inaugural address. He's pointing out to these people, you have ruined the country. And it is an us versus them mentality. That's what won him the election. And he continued that. He didn't shy away from any of that rhetoric this time. He did it in a different tone, but he didn't shy away from the rhetoric that he had during his campaign. What wasn't tame at all, and I think a lot of what dominated the social media landscape today was what was going on outside the inauguration, all the protesting, and unfortunately, some of that protesting turned violent. I think the last count was about 100 protesters were arrested, a little bit over 100 or 200 protesters arrested. 6 police officers were hurt in riots and things like that. And you never like to see that. But that also was a was a big talker today as well, Matt. Did you see a lot of that, a lot of the violence that went down today?
I did. I saw, these videos of, Bank of America getting busted into, the windows getting shattered. You see the police in riot gear chasing people with tear gas. And, I hate what I'm about to say. Is I kind of feel like I say it, people say it as a cop-out. Oh, I'm all for protesting. And I really am all for protesting. I mean, politics is a form of protest. You're protesting what we currently have, and then you're trying to make it better. The country is built literally on protesting. I mean, that's what our country is built on. So I really am for it.
I remember that little tea party about 240 years ago.
Right. Yeah, you might have heard of it. I just wonder, and people don't have to throw, okay, obviously the American Revolution was violent. The Civil Rights Movement was violent. Because usually of one side. But, I wonder today when people who are protesting Trump, a million thoughts always go through my head. One, what is breaking the Bank of America window going to do? What is that going to do? I get you're angry. Believe me, I get that people are angry. You see it it's in your face every day that people are angry. But what is that going to do? And I really do wonder, and I wonder how much of this is mob rule mentality. I wonder how much of this is they're just doing it to do it. All of these thoughts go through my head. We'll never get an answer. I think, and depending on when you're listening to this, we're recording this on Friday. The inauguration happened today. I think we'll see a much more peaceful demonstration in the Women's March on Saturday. And with the amount of people they're expecting, I think that's going to get the point across a little better. But when we see this type of violence, what are they proving? Okay, I get you're angry, or maybe you're just doing it to do it, but I get you're angry about Trump. But what are you proving by getting arrested or breaking stuff, or you're going to have to pay a fine? You're going to have to, what does that prove? I'll never really understand, unless you're physically being oppressed, which happens in some parts of the country. Let's not be blind to that. Unless you're physically being oppressed, what are you physically fighting now that you're protesting in D.C.? That's what I'm thinking with all these protests.
Yeah, the initial clips I saw, and I watched CBS News's coverage today. I work for a CBS affiliate, always have, so I like CBS News. They just showed guys just turning over garbage cans and, throwing down newspaper stands and just busting windows indiscriminately. Yeah, I mean, they just did it. Yeah, they just did it just to do it. And then they had a soundbite from a guy who was there just to be heard, just to protest, just to be there. And he said, these guys take away from what we're trying to do. They give all protesters a bad name. The vast majority of people that were there were, forming a human wall, or were just there to hold a sign. Or I saw two people that had buttons all over their clothes. They were just there to protest and have their voices heard and do it peacefully. But you had, the 200, 300 knuckleheads that decided to turn violent. And if that's how they feel like they needed to express themselves, that's their prerogative. But of course, that's against the law. They're going to be arrested. They're going to be fined, like you said, and that's not what you do. The civil rights movement, black people in the 60s and 50s were being physically assaulted. And how do you fight that? And Martin Luther King, we just celebrated, his birthday and a day commemorating him and what he did for the civil rights movement. He was always about peaceful protest, but in the face of violent retribution for trying to make progress. And these people aren't doing that. If they really were upset and angry and wanted to, if they're Obama supporters, he kept on saying, violence isn't the answer. We can't do it with violence. Do it peacefully. But they just, some people just, hate to borrow the phrase, but want to watch the world burn, and some people just want to set the fire. And that's a shame. But it does give people that were there just to protest a really bad name.
And what that also does is, if I've heard this once, I've heard it a million times since Trump got elected. Not everybody who voted for Trump is a racist or a bigot or a misogynist or whatnot. Okay, that's fine. But what this does is it paints the picture, at least for those, a lot of the same people who say that, is that every protester, every Democrat is a violent, rabble rouser, whatever kind of word you want to say. So it paints everyone with a broad brush. Mm-hmm. And who does that help in the end? And listen, I mean, for you and I, we both lived in, different parts of the country, and we're probably not the demographic that Trump was targeting. I mean, you and I have been fortunate enough in our lives that we've been working consistently since we graduated college. We're working our way up the ladder. And we're not the people who lost their job from the manufacturing and all that. And we're not, neither one of us is a person of color who has felt oppressed by a system that they feel is against them. So I don't know how it feels to be that frustrated where you're burning cars and whatnot. It just seems to me that, and people don't like hearing this because I guess when you're violent, you get that instant gratification, but it just seems to me is that change is a lot slower than people want it to be. And it comes from being active in your community, getting people to vote. I know that sounds stupid and that sounds like, repetitive, but, be active in other ways. And it's easy for me to say that. Like I said, it's easy for me to say that because I've never been to the brink of, feeling that way where I have to respond violently. So I wholeheartedly admit I'm saying this from a view that other people probably don't have. But I just, violent protest just seems like it's more trouble than it's worth.
Yeah, I agree. And even sometimes non-violent protests, you wonder what they're trying to get across. But I think now more than ever, you're going to see people put some action behind those protests. Even the people that were there to do it peacefully today, I think you're going to see over the course of the next few years that there's going to be a grassroots effort. I was reading something online today, I think it was from the New Yorker, that you're seeing a groundswell of Democrats, a grassroots effort to get people to get out and vote and to support their ideals. And normally it goes from the top down. Instead, this is working from the bottom up. So that's you can already start to see the impacts. Want to talk really quickly about some of the lighter stuff. How the inauguration, I guess, was covered. What network did you watch, Matt?
I had it on NBC for most of it. Actually, I split between ABC and NBC.
Okay, all right. So I watched exclusively CBS. You watched ABC and NBC. I think I like CBS because I like Bob Schieffer. That guy's seen it all. I mean, he's been doing this for almost 60 years now. And, I like Dan Rather back in the day too, but just how they do their coverage, when you have a guy like that can lend some background experience, he covered Kennedy being assassinated and then all these presidential inaugurations from Johnson on up to today. And he lended some insight. And I was wondering what you thought about trying to kind of compare this inauguration. How do you think that the networks NBC and ABC did to kind of compare and put this all into perspective?
I'll tell you the truth. I think what I was watching, and here we go, the media. I thought it was fair in that compared to Obama's inauguration was historical for a much different reason than this was historical. And that's fine. Those two things are fine. And we had a conversation about it earlier today. Like we need to watch history. This was the first time that I don't know, probably any living American can remember that a guy like Donald Trump,
non-politician, businessman, has ever held this up.
This close, non-war, non-general, even got this close. And so It was historical for different reasons. Some of the stuff going around on social media, they showed the National Mall with Obama's inauguration and Trump's inauguration, and immediately I saw the backlash to that. You have the National Mall is basically covered in people for Obama's inauguration. For Trump's inauguration, it's what, like a third, maybe a third full,
half, maybe, yeah.
Yeah. So, and that is a big deal too. I think that sends a message, you know. And so I click on that picture, and I'm reading social media comments, and you know, I thought the networks did a good job of explaining that, you know, especially during the parade. Hey, there are the people who are here are clapping, are cheering. The parade was a little paltry with the turnout, from the views I saw. But you know, I click on the picture, and immediately you have people, yeah, because you know liberals don't work, so they can turn up the inauguration. Oh my God, you know, like that sounds like a bunch of people who really want to unify the country. You know, like so all these things, like. I thought it was like the networks I was watching, like this is unprecedented. This is, you know, this is kind of crazy. This is wild. I thought they were fair in saying that and putting it in historical context. What about CBS?
CBS was good. You know, Schieffer lended his wisdom. During the actual, you know, inauguration and the parade and all that, you know, they had to go through the, you know, whole spiel. I think they were very well prepared to kill time, which they had to do because the parade itself got off to a late start, then it was a little slow, and you know they were tap dancing to kill time. But you know they filled in with interesting stuff about the inauguration itself, the people in attendance, and I feel like they were, especially CBS, because I think they got a lot of heat for some of their commentators during election day being a little bit more sullen, I guess, at the outcome. But I thought they did a pretty good job of giving President Trump proper, respect after the inauguration. And even once Scott Pelley kind of tripped up and said President-elect Trump after he had already been sworn in, he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, my apologies, you know, President Trump." But, you know, they always kind of straddle a fine line between trying to keep their emotions out of it. You know, Bob Schieffer threw in some, you know.
What does he got to lose now? He's got nothing to lose now.
I thought he was retired, but he came out of retirement for this. Yeah, he threw a barb or two. And then you got Dan Rather, who you should go if you haven't. I know we both have. If you haven't, he wrote a very pointed, long-winded Facebook post about this, and he more than anybody would have perspective about presidential inaugurations. But he called the speech very dark and not really unifying at all. What did you read that? What did you think of it?
You know, I think that was a theme I saw from a lot of the networks that they, you know, and I kind of thought so too. You know, that's what I was hitting on before. The America that Trump described was not really the America you and I have lived in. I personally think, you know, we don't have to deal with the rusted down factory that left town, you know, fortunate enough. And, but I understand, before I go into my thoughts on the speech, I thought Dan Rather hit it on the head with his Facebook post, because I mean, he has seen it all too. You know, him and Schieffer have seen it all. I thought he hit it on the head that Trump did describe a dark America, and you know, that he was going to bring back. And I understand how that would have excited his core. It would have excited his base. That's what they elected him to do. That's what he's saying he's going to do. And I get that. I get that. But I personally, I thought the speech was kind of boring. I guess kind of, I don't know. I didn't think it was like, I didn't hear, you know, we kind of heard all this on the campaign, and you're not campaigning anymore. You won. Like, let's hear something else. Didn't hear any of that. He said we're entering a new millennium, and people are gonna, you know, it's 2017. It's not exactly true, and people are gonna say, well, that's why Trump won, because you're gonna point out that elitist stuff. No, I mean, he said we're entering a new millennium, and that didn't make sense. And I just thought it was kind of, I don't know, boring. Monday, we heard you're gonna make America great again. I don't know how. I still don't know how. You have some ideas. Haven't done much yet. Like I just wanted to hear more. I wanted him. If he's blaming Washington so much, I wanted him to reach out to those people who didn't vote for him and like him, and say, "Here's why you should come in." That's what I wanted to hear, and that's what I don't think I heard.
Yeah, and that's normally what happens during a presidential inaugural address. They try to heal the wounds that were created and and divisions that were created during the election, and they try to speak to their base, but they also try to speak to the other side and say, you know what, everything's going to be okay. I can't say for certain that he did that, but I'll give him some credit. His speech, like you said, wasn't as bombastic, and it wasn't as out there. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. He's going to have to be like that. He can't be on the campaign trail, Donald Trump, saying that he wants to, punch people in the face. And if I could go out in the street and shoot somebody and I would still get votes, he can't say that stuff anymore. So he has to be very measured in his words. And he was doing a lot of reading off a teleprompter, and that's fine. That's great, because most of the speeches that he gave that actually sounded like a speech a president would give have been off a teleprompter. He's a good public speaker. I'll give him that. He's a good public speaker. He knows how to do that. But his speech today wasn't, like you said, it wasn't mind blowing. But I don't think it didn't need to be mind blowing, because I don't think anybody that didn't like Trump before was going to like him because of an inaugural address. I think what he has to do now is figure out how he's going to mend the fences and how he's going to reach across and grab those people. And he has some decent ideas with child care tax credits, is what I'm trying to say, and some things that'll, he's got some ideas. So whether he does them or not, we'll see. But I don't think he had to lay everything out right here in that inaugural address.
He didn't need to. Okay, you're right. He didn't need to lay out his plan. I get it, and he has kind of what he wants to do with his first 100 days. Obviously, we don't have to get into it. Obviously, Obamacare is the big thing.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people know they're in a world of trouble if they don't have anything to replace it before they repeal it, and it's not going to happen right away. It's just going to, it's a process. I get that, but the way you mend fences, and if people, if people feel like America is better off because of what he's doing, if they're making more money, if they're doing all that sort of stuff, then that's how you mend fences.
Yeah, and that's going to have to happen sooner than later, and that's tough to do. But he only has 4 years for right now to do all that. So we'll see. We'll see, Matt. I mean, it's going to be an uphill climb, I think, for him to get a lot of the folks that did not vote for him to come around. He currently has the lowest ever approval rating for an incoming president at 32%, so says a CBS poll. And they've been doing that since the first year of Ronald Reagan's presidency. They started that back in 1981. So we've had 5 presidents, and no one's had a lower approval rating than him. So
even a Fox News poll had him at lower than 40%. So it's not just the networks that he thinks against them, or Fox News like 39. So
yeah.
Before we go, I want to tell 2 stories. I'll tell the more depressing one first, and then we'll end it on a lighter note. Guys, and I do this to myself all the time. I go down the rabbit hole on social media, and when you go down the rabbit hole on social media,
it's not a good thing.
No, you would find people you didn't think existed in this world, but they do. And I just get myself too wrapped up. But unfortunately, I came in contact with one of those people last week. I was at Disney World, and Disney World is, to a lot of people, including me, one of the happiest places on earth. Disney World. A lot of people from a lot of other countries, a lot of people from this country go to Disney World because they love Disney. Usually they have kids. They want to, they want to have a good time. So, I was walking through the park, and in front of me there was a family that was speaking Spanish, and they had a baby or stroller. Obviously, there's a lot of people at Disney World, and some, when you're walking through the Magic Kingdom, it's kind of tight. And the baby, I guess, ended up fussing in the stroller, and he kind of held up traffic, but that is what it is. Doesn't matter. And so I walked around him, and other people walked around him, and right behind me, somebody said less than a week, just gotta wait less than a week, and then we're gonna kick them all out. And I could not believe what I heard. I just could not believe a lot of reasons. I guess first and foremost, that family paid good money to be at Disney World, and they got a baby. Things happen. I'm sorry if you were inconvenienced and you had to walk around them. I don't care what language they were speaking. They're having a good time. And just thought, what? Trump puts his hand on the Bible and poof, all non-English speakers are just gone from the country? It's that type of stuff that really, I think, it upsets me. It's an upsetting story to everybody I've told, and if anybody's hey, did you do anything? Did you say anything? I turned around, gave him the worst glare I've ever given, and then I got pulled away by my girlfriend, but which is probably for the best. And it really bothered me for the rest of the day. I just couldn't stop thinking about this guy and how he could really think that. And I think when if you were to ask protesters, if you were to tell a protester that story, they'd point to that and be like, that's exactly what we're upset about. That's exactly what we're, and those are the fences that I hope can be mended, that people don't have to think that way.
Well, he said in his speech that if you believe in freedom, you don't believe in prejudice. So, that was a line that I took away and said, okay, well, that's a start. That's a start.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to see that. That's what I do want to see. If you say that in your speech, that's what I want to see. And I want you to encourage, I want him to encourage people who might feel that way, to not think that way. And look, you're not going to fix that guy. If I were to say anything to that guy at Disney World, nothing I said to him was going to change the way he thought. I doubt it. That sort of stuff takes time. But that's what I'm worried about, that there are people that almost feel empowered to say that or think that. And I don't agree with that. I don't care, if you want to say we're on the news, we're not supposed to have those type of opinions. There's no place, in my opinion, for that type of thinking. So I'm hopeful that he does encourage people to not think that way. So that was the sadder story. Here's the more uplifting story I think we can end on. It's kind of, you're big into history. Mm-hmm. So when Andrew Jackson was elected, 1830, mm-hmm. And it's crazy, I think he was the 7th president. He's way back then. Yeah. Candidate that comes to mind that could even come close to what I've Trump, I like history, and because frontiersman, he was not a political guy. He was an outsider. He did use a very America first populism sort of rhetoric, and he was elected to the White House. And so they opted to have an open house at the White House for his inauguration. And they provided them free whiskey punch. And what ended up happening in Andrew Jackson's inauguration was that his supporters flooded the White House, got trashed, ransacked the White House, and they had to move the booze to outside so people would leave the house and keep drinking outside. And it's said to, every book says that the elitists at the time were just appalled. And I read today that somebody on Trump's transition team, they were tossing around the idea of literally having an open house, the White House. And I was just trying to picture this if it really happened. And I just thought it was so funny. And, I don't mean to bore anybody with a history lesson. I think that would have been cool if, people got an open house at the White House. But the guy said the reason they didn't do it is security is a little different today than it was back in the 1800s. So
get out of town. Really?
Funny, Andrew Jackson.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with what we obviously didn't need to see that what we saw today with the rioting and whatnot. But whoever had that idea in the Trump transition team, not saying that, maybe not the brightest.
Well, they didn't do it. So, it's fine.
The fact that even was an idea, a thought that crossed someone's mind is a little screwy, just saying. Probably didn't need to happen.
Maybe
probably didn't even need to be thought about. That's what I'm saying.
2021. Maybe 2021 we'll have
we'll see what we can do.
Bedroom.
I did think it was interesting, and this was before the inauguration and before all the festivities started, that a camera caught Obama in the Oval Office dropping off the letter to Mr. Trump, and that's been done for the last 4 presidents. I think George W. Bush did that for Obama. Clinton did that for George W. I don't know if George H.W. Bush did that for Bill when he came in, but it's been a tradition, I guess, for the last 20 years or so, to leave a note for the
George H.W. did do that for Clinton.
He did? Okay. And so I think that's a neat tradition that was continued. And also, while that was happening, you could see Obama passing a hallway, and there was already people in the Oval Office in the White House, changing fixtures and hanging up paintings and painting walls and things like that. And I do have to tell this joke that they were putting up all the gold leaf in the slot machines in the White House.
Gold drapes. I read online somewhere they put up gold drapes somewhere in the White House. I swear to God.
I mean, okay, yeah. I mean, obviously that happens, but it's just interesting how much they have to change. All of the embassies around the world changed the picture. They all of them have a picture of Obama. Now they have a picture of Trump. All the stuff that you wouldn't think about that has to change right after an inauguration changed. The limo that Donald Trump was riding in had the presidential seal put on it. The Secret Service changed the license plate of the official, I guess the official limo of the president, which is like an armored car basically. Yeah. It's like an Abrams tank, built to look like a car. They changed that. Just all this little stuff, all the little minutia that changes.
The POTUS Twitter handle changed.
Yeah, exactly right. So, there's a lot of little things that have to change in a very short amount of time. I didn't hear of any hitches in the giddy up, so I guess it all kind of went off without a hitch. So,
yeah,
very cool stuff.
Yeah. The coolest thing to me, honestly, the coolest thing to me of the whole day, Joe Biden taking the train home.
Yeah, he took the Amtrak.
The train is very important to him. He's a big, public transit commuter. And he took the train home to Delaware. It was very cool. Regardless of who you voted for, inauguration every 4 years it's almost like America's time to reset. And I think just like New Year's Day, you're hopeful for the new year. You can be hopeful for the next 4 years, and maybe in 4 years we're happy, or in your hopes are crushed in the next 4 years. I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen, but at least at inauguration, it's like a reset. It's kind of cool to see.
And it's supposed to happen. I mean, it's supposed to happen the way it happened. Yes. Regardless of the protesters, it's supposed to happen this way. President Obama, transition power. There was no fighting. There was nothing on that end to get in the way of a peaceful transition of power. So everything was smooth there. And you have to respect the process and respect the system that's been in place. Our country's not very old, but we've got some really awesome traditions, and Inauguration Day is definitely one of them. So if you didn't watch any because, your person didn't win, you're really doing yourself a disservice, because it's a part of history, and it's a part of, this country's legacy, this great country's legacy. So if you didn't watch, go back and watch some of it. It's a good history lesson. It really is.
I'm sure you could catch the highlights somewhere on every channel. I guess that puts a bow on our election or inauguration talk. Of course, this podcast will be available on iTunes. It's on Podbean. Go to our website, behindthescreenspodcast.com, for our video and everything we talk about. WBTS at WBTS Pod on Twitter. Find us on Facebook. We are everywhere, literally. Even if you can't see us right now, we're there. And
we are ubiquitous, Matt. We are ubiquitous.
That's right.
Everywhere.
What a big word. What a big word for me. And we will continue this because, yes, we could just riff all day about what we saw on TV, but who was actually there on the next episode, they'll probably have a more unique perspective than we do. Just, they are behind the screens. We were watching on the screen today. We weren't behind anything. We were on the screen today. But we'll talk to somebody who was there for our next episode. And we'll have more political talk. I mean, everybody loves it. It's big. Many people are saying this was our best episode yet. Many people, believe me.
It's going to be huge. It's going to be huge, Matt. All right. Well, for Matt, I'm Nate. We'll wrap it up, and we will see you guys next week.
Cool.